So back in 2018, Aretha Franklin died, and the singer left an estate that was eventually valued at roughly around 4.6 million, and that included property, cash, gold, and of course her music copyrights. Now I say eventually was valued because it was valued at much higher than that, and by the time they obviously looked through debts and taxes that were owed, it got down to about 4.6 million. Now subsequent to that, two different versions of a will were found, and one of them was found down the back of a sofa, which sounds like a story that would be made up, but it was true. And the jury had to look at the will and determine whether it was the final will of Aretha Franklin, because the two wills were different. And so we were talking about this in the office and saying how interesting that was, because they were looking at this will in America, deciding whether she'd written it and whether that would be justifiable, because obviously she'd written it on a piece of paper and it was found down the back of a sofa. Looking at the UK, obviously it's different rules, but what I want to do is first of all point you in the direction of episode 178 of the Money to the Masses podcast, because I talked about prioritising your finances and the order in which you should tackle certain jobs, and one of them was writing a will. So I covered the importance of that, and lasting power attorneys were covered in episode 179. So I'm not going to go over that today, but we'll put links in the notes of the show. But what I wanted to do is talk about the idea of what constitutes a will in the UK. And in theory, you could scribble your will on a piece of paper, but there are certain rules that need to be applied for it to be valid. Now, the first one is that it needs to be signed and witnessed by two adult independent witnesses who are not beneficiaries and who are present at the time that you sign your will yourself. And that should make it legally binding. Why that is now interesting, and I think this is coming after we made those podcasts, because the ruling came in 2020 because of the pandemic, and those episodes were recorded before that. It is now possible to legally witness a will remotely. So you could use something like Zoom or FaceTime to do it, and that's obviously because of the pandemic. So since the 31st of January 2020, it's been possible to witness a will remotely. Now, with that out of the way, that it needs to be witnessed, the other things are that there are standard ways of writing wills that are tried and tested, and they remove any confusion about what you mean in terms of language or if there's anything unusual in there. So there are ways around making errors, and that can be using templates. So you can get a template from a stationery shop, or you can get them online. They cost normally about £30, but they are the sort of thing, if you've got a very simple will, so you are leaving all of your money to a partner, for example, when you die, and vice versa, then yes, the templates can be useful. If you have anything more complicated than that, then you should really look up the services of a solicitor or a formal will writing service. So you should definitely use professional help to write your will if you have property abroad, you're trying to reduce inheritance tax, you may have business assets, for example, or you may have foreign investments or bank accounts. They are just some of the reasons why you might want to use professional help. Of course, it will cost more, but it will be worth it in the long run. Now, if you are happy to write your own will, because you are obviously allowed to, make sure you cover the following points: that the will is signed and witnessed, as I've already explained. You need to check carefully all your spelling, especially names. So make sure that you are very specific. So for example, if you want to leave everything to your partner, then make sure you use their name in full. If you've got old wills, then make sure you destroy them, because that means there's no confusion. Even though the newest one will clearly supersede the old one, make sure that it states that it revokes the old one in your new will. Tell your executors where the will is going to be kept, so they'll need to know where that is when you die. So don't just put it down the back of the sofa and hope somebody stumbles across it. Make sure people know where your will be. If you die, then they know where to find it. And what are the risks that if you write your own will? Now, there are risks to doing your own DIY wills, and that's obviously you could make mistakes. You could make it invalid by not signing it, for example. So if you do make an error, then your family could be left with legal expenses, having to try and challenge things, which therefore means they will end up inheriting less money. People might not receive the things that you want them to. And this is particularly important when it comes to making a will, when you're stating who you want to look after your children. But also, if things go wrong and it's a template that you've used, bear in mind that the company that made the template will not take any responsibility for things going wrong if you didn't correctly follow their instructions. Also, be aware that if you use a will template, the company that supplied the template do not take any responsibility for your will being correctly made. And so you've got the option of being completely DIY, where you do it yourself, maybe use a template, or you could go and see a solicitor. There is a bit of a middle ground that exists out there. There are online services that will help you write a will. There are companies like Fairwill, for example, that you can use online. It costs around about £90 to do a will with them. There is a link in the notes of this podcast, because actually there is a code that you can put in that is from Money to the Masses. You can get a discount if you use a company like Fairwill. So we'll put that in the notes of this show. So you can do that online. It will take you through a process that will help you make a will by using a series of questions. And we'll also link to a review that we've done of their services. So there you go. The Aretha Franklin story was a very good reminder of what the rules are in the UK and the things you need to do if you want to make a will. You understand why, we've already covered that, but these are the things you need to make sure you do to make sure that the will is valid.